So I'm going to fire up Unity. Anyone already familiar with state machines? Anyone who's used state machines before? Ever? You have? Okay. Where have you used them before?
I did a couple in C++ for a different programming class that we had.
Okay.
With, what's his name? Nguyen.
Nguyen? Did you use them for like a game, or did you use them for?
Yeah, we just did AI.
Cool. Yeah, AI is a really good example of a way to use a state machine. We use state machines all over the place at Blizzard. Okay, so I'm going to start up a new project. I'm going to call this one week 3. And you guys don't have to like follow along. Well, you can make a project. Hopefully you guys know how to make a project by now. But I kind of want you guys to pay attention, and then we'll dive into it together. Make sure I didn't miss anything here.
So with every lab, do you want us making a whole new project, or can we just do new scene after new scene?
You can make a new scene. It does save you some time to just make a new scene. The only reason why I make a new project is because it's pretty fast to start up a new project, and it makes it clean where I'm only using the packages that I need for that project. But you guys feel free to kind of use it however you want. Whenever I'm making a game at home, every new game is a new project. So for me, every week is kind of like a new game. So I don't know if I'm going to be using the same things that I used last week, right? But most of the time, we're going to be using Playmaker, though. So, all right. So to get Playmaker up and running, really the only thing you have to do is grab the Playmaker package, which I put up on Zool, and just drag it into this project folder down here. And it'll decompress it and then bring up a dialog box asking you, hey, do you want to do all this stuff? And you just want to hit import on here. This is like the only step that's not really in the lab, but this is so common of a thing to do that this should be really easy. Just drag and drop it into the project folder view and then import. And if you're not sure, if you can't get it working, then don't worry about it. Let me know. Well, I'll help you after the lecture. So the first thing we're going to make is a light. And in Unity, lights are very simple. I don't really need a first-person controller or anything like that. Oh, interesting. Okay, upgrade guide. So already in the scene here, again, I'm going to change my layout here to match what I like to use, which is a 2x3, which is where I have the scene and then the game. I like this because as I move the camera, it actually moves the game view as well. So you can't tell, but it's actually moving on the bottom. The reason is that I want to be able to set up a cube that I can project a light onto, because I can't really tell what's going on right now. If I press play, like it's playing right now, but nothing's happening because I don't have any control. So what I'm going to just do, and this is all in the lab, by the way. So I'm going to add a cube. Here's my cube. The reason for this cube is just to put a light on it. And the big thing is I want to put it kind of in front of the camera, or I'm going to move the camera in front of it. A little trick too, if you want like your camera to be at a very specific location, like let's say I want my camera to look like this. So my camera object's over there, right? It's looking kind of this way. But if I wanted to like look over here, maybe in front of the light, I do this. And then I make sure I have my camera object selected. And what I can do is I can click on this guy. Oh, where is he? Oh, right. So I go on here, make sure your camera is selected over here, and then go under, there's an edit, and then you can lock the view to selected, or, sorry, that's the wrong thing. I don't actually want to lock the view to selected. There's actually a way. Control-Shift-F is actually the key. I'm not sure why it's not showing up. If I hit Control-Shift-F, notice that my camera on the bottom is updating to wherever I move this thing here. It's just weird. Used to be an option here. Yeah, so hit Control-Shift-F, and then you can actually move the camera to be wherever you can move the selected object to wherever your camera is currently looking. So it's a lot easier than like trying to like rotate this thing to like be exactly where you want. Just move the camera where you want and hit that, and there you go. There's your position. Okay. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a point light to the scene, and this is another kind of quirk. I'm glad it actually did this of Unity. Notice where my cube is over here, and look how far my light is all the way over here. This is where I decided to put my light. Unity will basically put an object, when you go to make it, kind of wherever your camera is looking, like in the middle. And sometimes it decides to put it all the way in the middle of nowhere. So I'm going to show you guys a trick as well, because I kind of want this light to be right on top of the cube. Right? So I can move this light like so, and I can kind of like position this like this, and kind of get it in front of the cube. But that just kind of takes forever, and like it's kind of a pain to like do this. It's a lot of mouse clicks, a lot of moving. The easiest and fastest way that I found to do this is let's just say this light is like all the way over here. Right? I don't really care where that light is. It's just all the way over there. And I want to move that light that's all the way over here on top of the cube. Well, the way you can do that is you can actually take this point light, drag it on top of the cube. And what that just did is that actually just made that light a child of the cube. So now that point light, its position is based on wherever the cube is. So it's like it's stuck on to the cube. And I can just go up here with the point light selected, go to the top right. I can go to this little gear that I have selected, and I can reset the position. And now it'll put it at 0, 0, 0 relative to the cube. Now this light is directly inside the cube, right on top of it, and all I have to do is just position it very slightly in place. Okay? And then afterwards you can unparent it. You can just click on it and drag off, and it'll put it back in the world. So this is a kind of a trick. I don't know, they don't really show it a lot. I mean, it's pretty simple, but this is the fastest way I found to basically move one object to be on top of another. Okay, so I'm going to change the color of this light. Maybe something like red. You can see it change red down here. You can see that my light is actually updating in real time as well. So if I change it to something like blue or green. So with Unity 5.2, it looks a little different than in Unity 4. I kind of wanted to bring this to everyone's attention that the lighting in Unity is based on both the directional light here, that's the sun essentially, as well as the skybox that you have selected. And if you ever want to change that, like let's say you want to make this green like a really kind of bright green. This light is actually already pretty bright. Like cranking it up doesn't do too much to the light. It actually just kind of makes it so that it's a little bit more pale because it's mimicking real world. If you ever want to change that, there's under the window menu, there's a lighting tab. And you can take this thing, and this thing has the properties for like where the ambient light source is. Right now the ambient source is from the skybox. You can pick a color. You can also say like what your sunlight is. You can take your ambient intensity all the way down to 0, and notice my green is actually getting more green because there's no more ambient light. This is also, if you're making a level and you're not sure why the lighting is kind of not looking correct, this setting here is kind of where you want to adjust all of your properties. And maybe you don't want it to be based on a skybox here, because the skybox is pretty bright. You can also just change it to be a color if you want. If you just want it to be like red, and not based on the sky, you can change the color of the sky here. So for me, I'm just going to use the skybox. I'm just going to turn the intensity down for the ambient intensity. This is also where you pick your skybox material. So if you ever wanted to change your sky, you could do it here. There's some packages on the asset store if you want to have new skies. All right, enough about like the general stuff. I have a light and a cube. Any questions about that stuff? Sometimes it's not really clear. I don't know. I think it's kind of simple. Okay, so let's get into Playmaker. So Playmaker, we imported it. It actually added all these folders into our empty project. You almost never will navigate into these folders, so you kind of just disregard them. Almost all the things you're going to do to interact with Playmaker is through this option up here, the new Playmaker option on top. If you don't have this, let me know, because you should all have this Playmaker toolbar item.
Yes.
And also through Playmaker components. So the way that Unity works is Unity kind of treats all these objects as kind of dumb, empty objects. The thing that really makes Unity are its components. Unity is heavily based on what are called components. And if you guys have used Unreal 4, this is kind of familiar to you if you've ever used blueprints and adding components. Components are just things that you can add functionality. It's kind of like armor or like gear for like your objects in your world, which is a weird RPG reference. So like you can imagine that like the various kind of components all have different functionality. You can add components to your objects to change how they function. So the cool thing about Playmaker is that you can add a Playmaker component to anything in your level. Anything that you can click on here can have a Playmaker component to it, which means you can script and add behavior to anything in your level that you can click on. So for us, I'm going to make a light switch, which means I'm going to add a Playmaker component to this point light because I want to add behavior to it. I literally want to just have a button that I can click that turns the light on and off. So I'm going to go to Add Component, and I'm going to actually go to Playmaker, and I'm going to add a Playmaker FSM. Playmaker FSM stands for Playmaker Finite State Machine. It's just a state machine. This is just one state machine. Every state machine you want to have has to have its own Playmaker FSM. So like a vending machine would have one of these. Maybe it has more than one of these depending on if you want to have different state machines. Like an AI would have one of these, right? And what's nice is that there's two ways you can get to the Playmaker editor. You can either click this button here, or you can go to Playmaker editor, which will open up the same window. Okay. All right. Let me hide this. So I'm going to open up the Playmaker editor, and I'm just going to actually just dock it to the game here. So there's my Playmaker editor, and this is kind of what I mentioned in the PowerPoint. There are basically, there's one state that it adds for you, and there's a start event which tells you what state to start in. Okay, this is the default state. To navigate around, it's middle mouse click to click and drag to move the canvas around, and you can also zoom in and out with the mouse wheel. In the top right, there's going to be a bunch of these tabs. I want to get into a little bit about tabs in just a second, but I want to talk a little bit about how Playmaker functions. So I mentioned states. So in Playmaker, you can add states by right-clicking and doing add state. You can also control-click. We'll add states. You can make state machines this way. This is kind of a crazy state machine. Let me actually make this just bigger for everyone. It doesn't actually get any bigger than this, unfortunately. So I have all these states scattered around. Right now, they're not connected. This is just basically me just adding a bunch of states around. I'm just control-clicking and adding them. I don't actually need this many states. Let's just add one extra one. So states by themselves are not connected. Remember, you kind of have to have connections to actually have a state machine. You can rename states up here. I'm going to name this one. We're going to make this a light switch. Then I'm going to have it be on by default. And I'm going to make another state, which is just called off by default. Cool. Well, how do I connect this guy to another? How do I like connect the on switch to the off switch? Because I want to have a button that does that. Well, in order for me to do that, I actually have to have, tell Playmaker what causes the light to go from on to off. I can't just drag a wire from here to here. I want to just connect these two. The thing is that if you think about a vending machine, right, there's lots of different ways you can get to the point where you have enough money for a drink. You can insert a dollar bill. You can insert 4 quarters, or you can insert 10 dimes, whatever it takes. And the thing is that you have to tell Playmaker, how do I get from one state to another? And the way you do that is every time you want to have a new way to get from one state to another, you have to add a transition. And by default, there's only one transition that's kind of made for you that's used. This is the finished transition. And this means this is not really useful for us. Let's instead make something that is useful for a light switch. So in the top right here, there's an events tab. This is basically where you tell Playmaker, hey, these are the things I can do to go from one state to another. These are all the things that are possible to go from one state to another. If you go back to the stoplight example, right? What are all the things that we can do to go from one state to another? What are the things that can cause a red light to go from red to green? The time runs out for the red light. What else can cause it to go from red to green? Pressure on the pressure plate or whatever, the sensor.
Crosswalk.
A crosswalk. So there's like 3 different things that can cause it to go from red to green, right? Each of those 3 different things is an event in Playmaker. So an event, let's just say I was making a stoplight. One of them would be timer has run out. That would be one event. I just wrote that. Another one would be car is on the sensor, right? Another one is that someone push the crosswalk button, right? Those are 3 different things that can cause me to go from red to green. Those are 3 different events. So that's kind of how you have to think about when you're making events. What are the things that can be done to go from one state to another? Okay. What are ways that I can go from green to yellow? Well, like, is it all the same things? Or is it only maybe one thing, like the timer, maybe?
No. Oh, yeah. For
What?
yellow.
Yeah, to go from green to yellow, what are the ways you can go from green to yellow for a stoplight? Like, the timer can run out on green. Is there another way?
The crosswalk would do it, but the pressure pad would have to be from the opposing side of the street.
Okay. What if we just simplify it and let's just say it doesn't have a pressure plate or a crosswalk? It's just a stoplight with green and yellow. In this case,
The timer.
it would just be a timer. My point is that maybe for green to yellow, there's only one way to go from green to yellow. It's not always the same, right? And same, what about from yellow to red? What are the ways it goes from yellow to red?
Still be timer.
Right. It's just a timer. It only is time that controls from yellow to red. It's not a button or anything like that. So what does that mean for our events? We have these 3 different events, right? Car is on a sensor, someone pushed a crosswalk button, and time has run out. Do I need to add any more here?
That's just the description. It's not actually running any function. It's not-
Right, it's not doing it. These are just the things that can cause it to go from one color to
It's
another.
more of a note to you, but you haven't actually plugged in anything.
Yeah, I haven't plugged, but this is actually the important part. These things in this list populate the right-click menu when you're clicking on the state,
Okay.
which lets you choose what you can do, right? So these are events. What about for a light switch? What are the events that I can do for a light switch?
On or off?
Well, yeah, let's use them in terms of like things I can do. Like what can you do?
Turn it on.
Turn off, and you can turn it on.
That's it.
Okay, I like those 2. Those are 2 different things you can do to a light switch. Which means now that I've added them to this event list, I can go to this on state and I can right click, add a transition, and now you see it has those 2 things I added, right? Turn off and turn on. So this is kind of the interesting bit of question. I'm in the on state right now. The light switch is on. Which of these 2 things do I want to add?
You can only turn it off.
You can only turn it off, right? Okay, and what about if I'm in off state? What can I do?
Turn it on.
Turn on. Okay, so now this is looking more like our state machine that we had here, right? Okay, how do I connect these 2? Well, connecting them is actually very easy. I can't click and drag on the dark gray part. It'll just move it. But I can click and drag off here. There's a little wire that comes off. And you can plug this into a state. Notice that it has to be plugged into the dark gray one here. And then this guy I can just drag and plug it in here. It's a little weird. Like sometimes
It's
like,
dancing.
if it ever gets to be really weird, like where it's connecting, you can actually hold down Control and left and right arrows, and you can move the direction that the side of the arrow is on. It's more for visual. It doesn't change any of the functionality. Kind of like that he dances a little bit. It's like kind of arbitrary. Okay, so there's our state machine that we've defined. Okay, cool. This kind of defines how our light is going to function. Now, what we're going to do is actually make it do things, because that's kind of the last final piece that actually adds all the power. So let's go back to the light switch. When the light switch is on, because we flipped it on, what actually physically happens in the world?
You're
Like,
opening the circuit.
yeah, there's a circuit that opens, right? There's a power that goes to the light. The light, like the actual bulb or the fluorescent light, like turns on, it gets power and voltage, and it actually emits light, right? Those are things that it does. There's a lot of, maybe there's a lot of things that it does, right? Like maybe you're requesting power from the circuit, like from the grid, and it's like, it maybe turns on all these lights, for instance. Like that light switch on there controls like 8 different lights, right? There's a lot of different things that happen from one state, right? So same with the stoplight, right? When it's in red, the actual bulb in the stoplight turns on, right? And when it's yellow, the bulb in the yellow one turns on. Same with the vending machine, right? Things actually happen when you're in different states. So we need to do the same thing in Unity. So setting up your state machine is only kind of like the first half of the problem. So when I'm in this on state, there's this whole section over here, which is the action browser, which lets you control what happens in Unity in your game when you're actually in this state. So the way Playmaker works is that you have these states, you have these transitions that tell you how to go from one state to another, and you have actions. Actions are things that happen when that state turns on. Okay? And you can have any number of actions. You can have many actions in a single state, and they'll all execute. They'll execute in the order from top to bottom. So the actions will show up here, and we're about to add one, but they'll go from top to bottom. Okay, so let's add an action. So I'm in the on state. So what I actually want to do in the on state is I want to turn this light on. So the light's actually already on right now. So for the sake of this example, let's do the off state first. And the off state is just going to turn the light off. So you can open up the action browser by clicking this button down here, or you can hit tilde on the keyboard, which is the top left light button, and that'll also open up the action browser. And this is kind of like the meat and potatoes of Playmaker. This is why they charge money for it, is because they've implemented like everything that you could normally do by writing code in here through these actions. Okay, these actions span from things controlling lights to things that control GUI options to like game object control. And I never browse this normally. There's just way too many things. There's like way too many actions to like actually physically go through. Instead, I always use the search box up here. And the first thing I want to do is I want to do something related to a light. So I'm going to just type in light because I'm not sure like what I want to do. And it looks like here I have options to control the light intensity. So I'm going to just go ahead and add this to the action browser. There's lots of ways you can do it. You can double click on this thing. You can add by right clicking. You can also drag and drop onto it. Your choice. I tend to drag and drop because double clicking on it doesn't necessarily put it in the place that I want it. So I'm going to add a set light intensity option. And I'm going to crank the light intensity down to 0 because I'm going to turn the light off. So every action kind of has its own set of properties. Like for instance, if I want to set the light color has a color option here. Light intensity has a number that I can set. Okay, and some of them have a lot of options too. Like if you take a look at any of the iTween options, Tween has all these options you can choose, which we'll get to later. Tween is move like in between one object to another or one location to another. iTween is like the name of the company their product. Okay, so set light intensity is in the off state. This is an action that will run when I'm in the off state. Okay. So how do I get from here to here? What actually causes this transition to fire? Well, nothing right now. Right now, nothing is actually happening. If I play, and I will play right here, while Playmaker is open, Playmaker is really nice. It actually highlights in green the currently active state, the state that it's currently in. But I can't do anything in the game to move it from on to off. I need to have something in the game that lets me turn it off, right? What better way than a button that lets me do that? And what's nice is that Playmaker will let me draw buttons in the world through an action. So in my on state, I'm going to add a button. And when I type button in the action browser, there's a lot of different buttons here. I really am just interested for now, and for most part, you guys are only going to be using this, which is a GUI button. A GUI button, yeah. Graphical User Interface button. And so this button has a lot of options to it. And if I actually move this Playmaker so I can see both, there's a lot of options. One of them is just text. So this is where I'm going to actually type the text. I'm going to say turn off is the text. And notice here, I should put turn off in the world. It's kind of weird. Right now, by default, the button is made to be the entire size of the screen. So you can adjust the width and height here. A width of 1 means 100% the size of the screen for width. And if I crank this down to something like 0.2 and 0.2 for height, now I have something that looks more like a button up here, right? Left and top are also how far from the left and top you go. So I can put 0.1 there and 0.1 here to move it if I want to. Okay. And then if I press play, this is a button that actually I can interact with. So notice how it changes and I can click on it, but it's not doing anything.
It's not linked to anything.
Yeah, the button by itself just has some behavior to like draw the text and let you click on it. But clicking on it, just because I added a button doesn't mean that it's going to do anything. Because like I can add any number of buttons that I want. Maybe I want to add 2 buttons, right? Maybe I want to have a button that's like, maybe I have a Harlem Shake button. All right, I have 2 buttons now. Okay, I have these 2 buttons. Playmaker doesn't know what these buttons do. It's just like, cool, you have these 2 buttons. It's really important that you tell Playmaker what the buttons do when you click on them, which is why this drop-down box up here is super important. What event do you want to send? These are the same as the events that you added in the Events tab. These are the things. This is the thing you want to have happen when you click the button, right? It's pretty clear that when I'm in the state, I want to turn off the light. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of Harlem Shake for now. I don't think I need that. But now that I've selected that in the drop-down box here, I can click it and watch the colored light, and the light turns off. And the state changed from here to here. Okay? And I can't turn it on again. Well, I can't turn it on again because there is no button in this off state. So that's the lab you guys are going to do right now, which is lab number 1. I put pictures on everything. Lab number 1 is you're going to make a light switch that turns off when you click on it. That's the first thing. The second lab is I want you to make a light switch that turns off and on. So that's lab number 2. It's a reusable light switch. Then number 3 is I want you to make 2 lights that you can control independently with 2 different buttons. Okay. All right, do those 3 labs, and then we'll go on break, and we'll move on to the next step. Yeah. Let me stop this recording.